It is now my great pleasure to formally introduce Professor Emeritus Don Norman, who prefers to go by Don, to present the Guest of Honor address for DTUX Summit 2023. Don is a distinguished Professor Emeritus and founder, and first director of the Design Lab at the University of California, San Diego, as well as co-founder and first chair of the Cognitive Science Department, and prior to that, chair of psychology. He has been a vice president of advanced technology at Apple.
Stop. She is going to read this long, dull thing. And it will tell you about all the things I've done in the past. I don't care about the past. I'm here for the future. So,
Yes.
So here's what you need to know about me. My name is Don Norman, and I am world famous for doors you can't open. If you take a door and you push when it's supposed to be pulled, or you pull when you should push, or you pull when it should be slide to the left or right, that's called a Norman door. And there's a video about it that has been watched 10 million times. So that's what I'm famous for. Isn't that crazy? So that's not why I'm here, though, because I wrote a book called The Design of Everyday Things, which is where I talked about these kinds of doors. That why do you need an instruction manual to work a door? Crazy. Why does it have to say push or pull? So The Design of Everyday Things introduced design thinking and also all sorts of principles of design and what I call human-centered design. And today I am here to tell you why that is wrong. So it's really interesting. You want to know about me? Look at that slide. Oops, wrong slide. Give me back the first slide, you know, the one that tells about the summit? Yeah, so this is me. So DT, design thinking, yeah, that's what I do. UX means user experience. Well, where did that word come from? It came from me. I started as Apple, and in Apple I said, Apple computers used to be easy to use, they're getting harder. So I found two other people, and we started the User Experience Architect's Office. And that's where the phrase comes from. So I helped bring about that phrase. Because what's really important is the experience that people have in life in general. And that's why I interrupted. I wanted you to have a better experience. And then this other thing about humanity-centered. I said, humanity-centered? That isn't a term that's widely used. I said, wow, where did you get the term from? And they said, well, we got it from your book. I just finished a book. It was published in March a few months ago, and it's called, Design for a Better World. It should be meaningful, sustainable, and humanity-centered. Now, why did I do this book? Because I was thinking about my life and my career, and if I'm famous for Norman doors or for the notions of constraints and affordances and mappings and those principles, I make things that are easier to understand and easier to use. But you know what? That's important. But it doesn't change the world. And the world today is in major problems. We have climate change, we have other issues. And so what can I do that would make a difference to the world? So I thought about my career. I started off as an electrical engineer. I then became a psychologist, and then a cognitive scientist, and then a business executive, and then a designer. And I said, I thought about all of the problems that exist in the world and all the many people who have been writing good things about those problems and how to solve them. And I said, but nobody's doing anything. The United Nations has been meeting for over 20 years, every year, to talk about climate change. And they do all these wonderful meetings, and then they agree upon some sort of principle, and nothing happens. Because the real problem is people. Human behavior. So I put this book together, only the principles where I thought I had something new to say. But in every case, when I'm complaining about something, I have a rule about, and I teach my students, don't criticize anything unless you have a better answer. So I made sure that every time I quoted many eminent people saying what's wrong with gross domestic product, what's wrong with this, with that, with the other. And then I found people who had already wonderful directions to move, and I put those together. So that's what I'm going to talk about later. This is supposed to be just an introduction to me. Actually, I'm not sure. When do I give my talk? Right away? Or I'm already into it. Yeah, I can keep going. Okay. So let me tell you about what, I'll give you an outline of the book quickly. And then I want to tell you about a new project that I'm doing, and all in just in a few minutes. So it's, first of all, almost everything in the world is artificial, invented by people. And I start off with a picture. I'm sitting in my study in San Diego, and I look out the window, and I'm looking south, and I can see Mission Bay, which is a water recreational area. And it's artificial. It used to be a swamp. And I can see the city of San Diego. It's obviously artificial. And I can see the mountains of Mexico. Well, Mexico, the mountains are real, but the notion of a country is artificial. And it changes over time. And so everything in the world is artificial, really, which means it was designed by people for thousands and thousands of years, which means, well, if people decide it, maybe people can change it for the better. But if you look at the way people talk about things, it's not very meaningful. If the temperature increases by 1.5 degrees since the time of the Industrial Revolution in 1700s, all hell will break loose. And what? The temperature changes more than 1.5 degrees every day. What are you talking about? The climate scientists have been talking about this for a long time, and they only talk to themselves. And other people couldn't understand what they were talking about, because they're not talking about temperature. They're talking about heat. And if you are a scientist, you understand the difference between temperature and heat, but not the average person. The average person doesn't understand the difference between climate and weather either, which also causes problems, because they say, well, the weather changes a lot every day. Why are you talking about this climate, this difference? No, climate is long-term. Weather is what happens day to day. And though a lot of things. The other thing is a famous scientist, Lord Kelvin, a British scientist, said, if you cannot measure something, you don't understand it. And so, everybody goes around and trying to measure everything, and especially the economists insist on measuring everything in terms of money, because they want to have everything on the same scale. Well, that's stupid. Money isn't the most important thing in the world. And second of all, they are measuring things that can't be measured. But they don't care. So look at the stock market. You can actually measure risk on the stock market. When you invest in the stock market, there's something called beta, which is risk. Is beta really a measure of risk of a stock? No, got nothing to do with risk. It's the standard deviation of the price. That's not risk, but they call it risk. And after you called it risk, you forget that it's not measuring what you care about, and they think they're measuring real risk. But this is true of everything they're measuring. They can't measure what matters, so they measure something else, and then they call it by the name of what matters, and then they think they're... But you know what? Lord Kelvin didn't say that. Lord Kelvin said, if you can't measure it, you don't understand it. But he said, before that, he said, in the physical sciences. Now, you know, if I take this book and drop it, I can compute, it's really simple, from Newton's equations, how fast it's going to fall, and how much time it will take to hit the ground, etc. And if I do it again, it's the same answer. If I do it again, it's the same answer. It's what we call is path independent. What its history is irrelevant. If I drop a person, and now I try to drop that person a second time, People are not path independent. Our history matters a lot. And so all this stuff about measurement stuff is wrong. because they're not measuring the right things, they're not measuring the history, they don't understand it. Most foreign aid is wasted because, oh, there's a problem in sanitation, so we send in the experts, and the experts study it for 4 or 5 years and come back with a great big report, and they say for only 10 or 20 billion dollars in another 10 or 20 years, we will solve your problem. And the experts are experts, so they understand the problem and they have a sensible solution, and it almost always fails. First of all, you spend a lot more money than the 10 or 20 billion, and second of all, it takes a lot more time, and it still fails. Why? Because they don't understand people. They don't understand what people are good at, what they're bad at. So, humanity-centered means we should not design for people. This is like the British who came and conquered these uninhabited lands like India and Indonesia and Singapore and Hong Kong. And they were uninhabited except by people who lived there all their lives. And they said, you don't know how to govern yourself, so we know how to govern. So we will tell you how you should live your lives and what's good and what's bad and so on. And in Singapore, well, we don't like all these people living together, so we're going to put the people from Indonesia here. We're going to put the people from Malai there. We're going to put the people from etc. And they divided all of you up. That's crazy. You don't like colonialists who come in and tell you you should live your life differently. But that's what designers are doing. Designers go in and they study a problem, because if you do what I say you should do, you should spend in the anthropologists and understand the people, and then you go back and figure out what the real underlying problem is, and then you figure out a solution, and then you do it, and then you give it to the people and say, see, aren't you happy? No. The solution has to come from the people. So one of the most important rules of humanity-centered design is that when you work with doing societal things, this pin is the 17 colors or the 17 SDGs from the United Nations. And when you're working on those kinds of problems, the people know their problems already. They don't have to have an anthropologist coming in. And a lot of them are very, very clever, and they've already started to try to find solutions and attack them. The problem is they don't have much resources. They're often attacking the symptoms and not the underlying issues because they don't have the resources. And so designers should come in and be facilitators and mentors and assist them. But unless the ideas come from people, they don't work. One more point. The other problem with human-centered design is it is focused on the people we're designing for and not on the externalities, the harm that we are doing to the environment. When we do these wonderful cell phones and computers and other devices in the home, we never worry about where did the fancy materials come from and how did we destroy the ecology and the materials. Why is it we make it so it's so difficult to repair? And why is it that in the manufacturing process we pollute the world? How do we change that? Well, nature changes it. If you, I like to often, when I give this talk, to use an orange or a banana and say, look, it's packaged. See the skin on the banana and see the skin on the orange? It protects the inside fruit. But if you just rip it off and throw it on the ground, it becomes fertilizer and lets other things grow. We need to have a circular economy where things get reused and there is no such thing as waste. Plastic is a wonderful invention and it's so valuable and useful, except it stays around forever. And it's made out of fossil fuels, which increases carbon dioxide in the world. So what can we do? We have to change the way we manufacture things. And if we go to a circular economy where we don't have waste, and a number of companies are already doing this, but you know what? If you make it easy to repair and last longer, but I make my money by selling new products every year. How do I stay in business? And that's one of the important things. If we're doing humanity-centered design where we worry about the environment and it requires to change the way we manufacture and do things, how do we stay in business? What are the innovative strategies to design for sustainability? And that's what this conference is about, because I believe that when you actually are destroying things, you're wasting money. and that actually, if we actually followed the good humanity-centered principles and the circular economy, we would actually save money, and we could develop all sorts of new products and all sorts of new opportunities. But that will be for later, the rest of the conference. So, yes, I want to change the world. I want to change everything. I do want to change the economic views that we use. But I want the companies to survive, to keep making profits. And I'm not against capitalism. I'm against today's version of capitalism, which profits the very wealthy and the very rich and not everybody. We should not be measuring gross domestic product, which is how much a company or a country spends. We should be measuring how do you live a satisfactory life? Are you happy? Are you pleased? Do you think you're accomplishing something? We know how to do that. Psychologists can measure all of these subjective things quite well. It's just that the physical scientists and the economists don't know that, except for a few of my friends. So I have a couple of friends who are economists who are preaching this for some time. The first was Herb Simon, and he got a Nobel Prize in economics. And when that happened, I told my economic friends, and they said, what a waste of a Nobel Prize. Because he was talking about real people. The second one was Danny Kahneman, Amos Tversky. Now, Amos didn't get the prize because he made a mistake. He died. And if you die, you don't get the prize. But Danny Kahneman got it. And, I've known them since they were graduate students. And they were not economists, they were psychologists. And they started, you may have seen Kahneman's book called Thinking Fast and Thinking Slow. He's really the one that helped bring in real people into the study of economics. And since then, there have been others. Rich Thaler is another person at the University of Illinois, a real economist, who studies things like nudging to cause better behavior. So we can make a difference. And we can make a better life. And yes, the transition may cost some money, but I believe in the end, you will actually save money and make everybody live a better life. And that's my goal. Now, the last thing before I get kicked off the stage is I've retired 5 times, okay? I'm a failure at retirement. And the last retirement was in the year 2020. And what was I going to do? Well, so one of the things was to write this book. The other one is, what can I do positive in the world besides writing books? My most important contribution has been books, because books are educational tools, and they've educated literally tens of millions of people. And but I decided that my friends wanted to have a prize in my honor. And we were going to give some big prize to some big designer. And I said, no. If you're famous, you don't need another prize. What difference does it make? When you need it is when you're very young, just starting out. So what we're doing, we're launching the Don Norman Award Program, Design Award. And we're looking for, and maybe some of you in the audience will be recipients, we're looking for young, early career people who go out in the world, not just do a design of something. Design is worthless by itself. You may win prizes on it, but it doesn't change the world. You have to implement it and do it. So it has to be tested with enough evidence that we can look at it and say, it's just a small test. We understand because you don't have much money and you don't have much time, but it shows real promise of really changing society. And the kind of problems we're looking for is, again, the United Nations SDGs, the 17 problems. Homelessness, good food, drought, flooding, good safe water, good education, sanitation, etc. So we're going to be looking for these people and honoring you. And the first awards will be given in November 2024 because my city, San Diego, and Tijuana, Mexico, is the World Design Capital in 2024. And so we soon, in another month or two, will announce everything. But we also want to give awards to the educational groups that are training students to do this. And we want to have a conference also, a humanity-centered conference, because I would like humanity-centered to be a major theme of what we do in this world. And we need a place where people can come in and learn from each other. And so there'll be workshops and so on. And I'm trying to try very hard to change what we do in academics, where people talk about what they've done successfully and you publish it and you get promoted. You know, in academics, if you do something that saves thousands of lives, that's nice. If you do something that's published in the journal Nature or Science, you get promoted. We have to change that. We have to get rid of all these specialties and work on problems, not on narrow specialties. We need the specialties, but in order to do anything, you have to bring them all together. So we need an educational system that brings all the different disciplines together to work in a collaborative way. And so that's what I'm searching for, educational institutions that are doing this. And there are a few. But it's interesting, most of the ones I know of are not in the United States. In fact, most of the ones I've seen so far are in India. Interesting. But I want to change that too. So, thank you very much.
Thank you, Don. I will remember that. Human-centric is very, very different from something that's humanity-centric.
Centered is what we did. Human-centered is the past. Humanity-centered is the future. And by the way, they're very similar. There's only two major differences. One is that we think more broadly about the harm we are doing to the environment and to all living things. And second, when we design for society, we don't design for society. We design with, and we get the designs from. Don't tell people how they should live. Help them live the way they wish to live.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.